What brings you to the farm? What gets you involved in farming in general?
Well, my wife came off the farm. I didn't, but I spent all my summers in my grandpa's place in Worthington, so I ended up had some farm roots, but my wife was the one that was the key player in it. Uh, we ended up, there was a lot next to our house that we were able to buy, and then that really wasn't enough room for us, so I used to go and talk to John Myers at his house on Sunday afternoons, just visit with him. He was just like he was like my grandpa. He was a lot of history, but anyway, I was after him to sell me a piece of ground. So he was resistant to doing it because I think he thought I was going to develop it or something, you know. But anyway, we developed a good relationship, and he ended up, he said, okay, I'll sell you an acre. So we bought an acre from them, which went down just to the corner of the pond now, would have been the 1 acre. And then my wife decided, you know, we need some sheep for the kids to take care of so that they can make some money. So we rented a trailer and from U-Haul and went to Bellevue and bought 3 ewes. And that was the beginning of our sheep deal. And so we got by with them for a long time on just that acre, but then we kept thinking, you know, we need more pasture. So I went and talked to John, and I said, John, would you consider renting your around the farm buildings and whatnot? Our sheep, you know, would try to clean it up for you, you know. And he said, oh my goodness, yes. He said, I'd love to do it, have somebody do that, because I'm after the renter, which was just renting the ground. So it was full of horse weeds and everything else, so we tightened up the fence and turned the sheep loose, and before long it was just slick as a whistle because they would eat about anything. So anyway, that was the beginning of that. Well, then later on, it was in 80, we started thinking, well, maybe we could buy some more ground from him. Well, in that time, he had passed away, and he had left this whole farm to his daughters. It was 2 of them. And so we talked to them and were able to strike a deal to buy the farm and the buildings and whatnot. And so that was the beginning of our farming, you know. And like a lot of things, I moved into it. I didn't know a lot about farming, but it's like a fella used to say that he went farming. He didn't know much either. So he would just drive around the neighborhood and see what everybody else was doing and then say, well, maybe I'll go do it. But that's kind of what we ended up doing. So.
But who was John Myers?
Well, John Myers was a pretty key player in town from what I understood, you know, that he did a lot of things for the town. I guess he was on the school board, he was on the city council, he had a business in town, several businesses, and he used to talk different times about, he had farms all over eastern Iowa, and I think at one time I heard he had 7 farms, and he used to talk about the cattle he raised. Up around Cascade he would raise cattle, and then he had my neighbor would talk about during the war they would move those cattle and whatnot, and my neighbor Fred Noss was talking about one of the times he drove for John was that the speed limit during the war was 35 miles an hour, and he came through Langworthy and the cops stopped him for speeding with the truck, you know. But just another anecdote John used to pass on, but I have really enjoyed visiting with him, and you know, I tried to get some history of the farm from him, and he would, you know, talk about, well, the pond that's there that we built is upstream from where the original one, but there was a big pond further down in the flat, the way John described it to me, next to the road. But that was a fairly good pond, apparently, because he said when the circus came to town, they'd bring the elephants over and they'd take a bath in this pond. So anyway, it was just another anecdote that he would tell about anyway.
Just tell me about the buildings in general. When you came here in the early 60s, buildings like this were being torn down or at the very least
Yeah.
ignored and fell down.
Yeah. Well, both my wife and I, for some reason, felt they needed to be preserved. So we did a lot of work, painting, and I also had tuck pointing done on there, trying to save it, you know. But the other thing that happened is the roofs that were on the barns were a very old metal roofing that had, the way they were made was tin strips that would hold down one edge and then the other clamped over it. However, somebody in their brightness thought that the center of that thing was flexing, so they put nails in it. And that's what happened. The holes, you know, where the nails were, ended up becoming rotting, and then they would get loose and come off. So we decided that the only way to save them was to keep the roofs in good shape. So we researched and found a place that had good white tin. The old ones that were on there were galvanized, but they had been painted over with black or asphalt or something to try to stop the leaks.
Good intent.
Yeah. So anyway, when we tried to preserve the appearance of the barns with white roofing, and it did add. And like some of the barns already had some of that newer steel, so it really didn't change the appearance that much, and that was our intent. And it's so heartening to know there are people that are interested in this old barnsteads and that, and want to preserve it for the future. And lo and behold, there's some people here in town that are very instrumental in making that happen. And I can't say enough about what they've done and how they do it to promote this endeavor and to get it registered on the National Historic Place. I mean, this is big time stuff. And then go to silos and smokestacks and you folks, all of that is tremendous, more than you could envision. So I'm just so appreciative, and we are all appreciative of it.